Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Kurachem avabanim, richam Adonai yireav. As a mother has compassion for her children, so may Adonai, our God of compassion, follow the family and friends of Fran Ackerman, who we come here to remember this day. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are dust. Our days are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. A wind passes over us. We are no more. But we trust that God's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children endures age after age, unchanging. We begin our service by reciting Psalms, thus linking Fran's life to our ancient tradition, to the Jewish people, and the eternity of God.
Shir lama'alot Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz Ayitin lamot raglecha al yanum shomerecha Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomerecha Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach balayla Adonai yishmorcha mikora yishmor et nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata v'ad olam.
I lift my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? This is a question the psalmist asked thousands of years ago, perhaps at a time of sorrow like this one. And here was his answer. My help comes from heaven and earth. Adonai won't let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. For the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from harm and guard your soul. For Adonai guards your going out and coming in, now and forever. Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai roi lo echzar. Bino deshe yarbit seni amei minuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi shovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech b'geisal mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha hema yinachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai. Dishanta v'Hashem roshi kosi revaya, achto v'chetzidir defuni koyme chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai leorech yamim. Those are the Hebrew words of Psalm 23, which is also known as the Shepherd's Psalm because it guides us through difficult moments like this one. I invite you, if you would like, to join me as we recite it in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Although we are currently reading in our annual cycle of Torah from the book of Exodus, it is really from the book of Genesis that we learn that at the time of the passing of the matriarchs and the patriarchs of our people, It is members of the family who come forward to speak words of remembrance and words of eulogy. And so to begin that ancient tradition, Stephen.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I know some of you have come from great distances, and my family and I are very grateful. We are here to mourn the death and honor and celebrate the life of my extraordinary mother, Fran Ackerman. She was my role model, my protector, my booster, and the one who created the template for how I wanted to live my life. I could stand here and talk for days on end and never live up to the legacy she left or properly convey what this wonderful woman meant to me. She taught me how to treat other people with kindness and consideration, the importance of empathy, and the power of creativity. I was concerned that my memories of her from before she became ill may have dimmed slightly, because when you're the caretaker for a parent with dementia, not only do you experience the loss of the person they were before the illness, you lose the day-to-day memories of what it was like to have them as parents because you're so obsessively focused on monitoring symptoms, making the right decisions for their care. But Fran Ackerman was singular. She was so special and loving and brilliant and kind and generous and selfless and altruistic that this awful disease, try as it might, could not completely shut out her light. And the truth of the matter is, no matter how daunting a task this is or how unworthy I feel, I know that she would be proud of me no matter how I do today, because she spent much of her life reminding me and my brothers, in both word and action, of how proud she was of us and how much she loved us no matter what. And if you knew her reasonably well, she probably made you feel the same way. Everyone in this room personally experienced what it was like to be on the receiving end of Fran Ackerman's adulation and encouragement, to be on the receiving end of one of her famous hugs, and to know instantly that this was no act, that she was genuinely thrilled to see you and be with you in that moment. And I know you all know what it felt like to be addressed by one of her famous terms of endearment, like pickle, or doll baby, or cookie, or love bug. Sometimes there'd be combinations. I'd like to read something my cousin Deborah Ackerman wrote on Facebook that I feel captures my mom perfectly. I'm going to quote, "My sweet, lovely Aunt Francie passed away today. She was always a part of my life from week one. And I have no memory of her not being there. She was the definition of kindness, always just loving and accepting people for who they were and receiving them with open arms. And this is not an exaggeration to make her sound better, but the actual truth. I never once in my entire life heard her say a bad word about anyone. I never once heard her complain. I never once saw her get angry." And just an aside from me, she did occasionally get angry at me and my brothers for misbehaving, but it was always justified. And it never lasted long. She was just too much of a softie and too full of love to stay mad for very long. My late mother-in-law, Linda, once told Fran, to my and Jen's great amusement in her New York accent, "Sometimes you just got to tell people to go F themselves." And she didn't say F. Linda never said F. No, she said the word. It was actually a good piece of advice, but one my mom never could have heeded. To continue with Deborah's tribute, quote, "She was incredibly smart and well-educated and yet never made anyone feel lesser than, always treating everyone as an equal and a beloved person of value. She was a delicate soul with creative, artist-sensitive nature, and yet she was also tough enough to raise 4 strong-willed boys. I think you are fortunate in life if you have some people in it who you can feel are always truly delighted to see you no matter what. Aunt Francie was one of those people in my life and for so many other people's lives. She could make anyone feel like they were special. Her delight shone from her face and through her very distinct voice, which is burned into my memory. Whenever I imagined her in my mind throughout my life, I always pictured her with her arms wide open, crying out in joy at first seeing me, because that truly was her essence. I will miss her and her cute nicknames and her Philly accent and her love for our family. She was my aunt. I was lucky to have her. I will miss her so much. She leaves a huge absence for her boys, her daughters-in-law, and her grandkids. My heart goes out to you all, and thank you for that, Deborah. I know you're here." My mom was also an immensely gifted writer, poet, lyricist, artist, and a prolific crafter of puzzles and word games, published in several magazines. My brother is going to read a few pieces of her poetry in just a few minutes, and you will hear how she managed to make them funny and accessible to children without talking down to them, but still clever and equally funny to adult readers as well. She earned a master's degree in English from the University of Pennsylvania and had a lifelong love of words and puzzles, which she shared with her beloved sister, Renee. The two shared a deep bond and both had beautiful singing voices. They even harmonized together and performed duets as the Bayless sisters in their youth. One of my fondest memories of their bond was being a background listener as they talked on the phone just about every day to go over that day's Philadelphia Inquirer crossword puzzle. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge Renee's husband, my late uncle David Sandler. He was one of my mom's truest friends, protectors, and advisors, a true brother to her, not just a brother-in-law. I would also like to acknowledge my talent and brilliant wife, Jen. Despite her protests and pleas to keep the attention off of her at all costs, Jen is the daughter my mother never had, and my mom loved her like she was her own. For the last 9 years of my mom's life, we dealt with elder care attorneys, home health agencies, assisted living facilities, and social service agencies in an unending effort to make sure she always had the best care. Jen was front and center in every undertaking. She has a bottomless supply of patience, persistence, and meticulous attention to detail, all qualities which I aspire to but sometimes lack. She was also a hands-on substitute nurse, social worker, and caretaker to my mom on countless occasions. She is as responsible as anyone, perhaps more so, for the exceptional quality of care my mom received in the last 9 years of her life. Lastly, I want to briefly talk about my dad, Jerry Ackerman. He and my mom occasionally argued. She wasn't always as punctual and organized as he would have liked, and he wasn't always as understanding of her hobbies or considerate of her time as she would have liked. My wife and I can attest to the fact that it frustrated him to no end that my mom had to take over all driving responsibilities after he became ill, and it certainly was not easy for her to suddenly be responsible for the driving and finances and other things that had previously been under the exclusive domain of my father. But they loved each other deeply, and they were devoted to each other throughout their 45 years of marriage. The stories my brothers and I could tell about their relationship, some of them endearing and most of them hilarious, could fill a book. Their personalities complemented each other so well, and it's difficult to imagine how they could have gotten along without each other. And now, my brother Dan will read a few pieces of my mom's poetry. Forgive us for not having this planned with total precision, but her work, I think, is too ingenious for us not to sample out loud. And then I'll read a brief closing remark.
So everyone knows how incredibly creative my mom was. And when someone would read a headline like this I'm about to read, they would say, "That's nuts." She would sit down and write a limerick about it. So in the bulletin on August 31st, 1976, chickens born without feathers suffer psychological problems and hypothermia. And my mom wrote, "There once was a featherless fowl who warned Farmer Jones with a scowl. The flock will be shocked if they see me unfrocked. Better cover me up with a towel." In the Inquirer on September 4th, 1976, a rooster chased a 7-year-old girl around the block. So my mom wrote, "Red the rooster is up to his tricks, pursuing the girls just for kicks. But the gals he's presuming to chase now are human. Quote the roaster, why not? Chicks is chicks." And in the Associated Press, no date? Come on, Mom. Cupcake, a Siamese cat, survived over 1 week in a box of DVDs sent via the mail. So my mom wrote, "A cat in a bit of a squeeze declined to meow her unease. Instead, the poor Cupcake, somewhat slow on the uptake, took cat naps and watched DVDs." And along with the cat theme, I'm going to read a poem called Meow. Our cat went outside feeling happy and free. Then she spied a small bird high up in a tree. "Come down," called the cat to the bird and the tree. "Please come on down and play with me." Said the bird to himself, "Now I've got a hunch. This cat has decided to eat me for lunch." So the bird moved up higher and the cat did the same, thinking the bird was playing a game. Then all of a sudden, with hardly a sound, the kitty's branch snapped and the kitty fell down. She wasn't hurt badly, but she learned that day, never ask a bird to play. And now I'm going to close it out with, it kind of shows my mom's dark sense of humor, and it's pretty apropos for today. It's called General Practitioner. I'm not a hypochondriac, but trust me when I say there's a twitch in my esophagus that just won't go away. And every time I swallow food, my liver feels so swollen. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a blockage in the colon. My lower back's been giving me a peck of trouble too. My ribs go into spasms every time I tie my shoe. My corneas have thickened. I have spots before my eyes. And when I turn my head too fast, another brain cell dies. I know my heart is failing. I can hardly catch my breath. If any hemoglobin drops again, I'll surely bleed to death. I'm due for my appointment in your office today at 3, though how I'm going to drive my car is a mystery to me. Unless I'm much mistaken, rigor mortis has begun. So if I don't show up on time, don't wait. Call 911. And that was my mom.
I'd like to close with something I wrote shortly after my mom passed on Sunday afternoon. I hope you will say a prayer for her tonight, but the most appropriate tribute you could give her would be to go out of your way to show kindness to someone who needs it. Compliment a server or a caretaker or anyone who provides a service with little or no fanfare. That was the example my mother set for me as a child and continued right through to the end of her life. She was selflessness, kindness, and unconditional love, never wavering. That is how I will remember her always.
Thank you. That was beautiful. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, taught that there are 3 ways to mourn: tears, silence, and a song. Tears or stunned silence at the passing of a loved one we can surely understand. But what does it mean to mourn with a song? Perhaps it's a reference to the Psalms we've already heard, or the prayers that we'll recite at the conclusion of this service, or maybe it reflects the eulogies that are given in which those who love Fran have sung her praises. Clearly, that's what we've heard. In Hebrew, the word shir can mean song or poem. In any case, it's easy to sing the praises of Fran Ackerman. And everybody would agree with what you've said, Stephen. She was a lovely, gentle, kind, warm, caring person. And as Jen said, she never had a bad word for anybody. Todd, you put it even more succinctly. You said she was a gem. Interesting to note that Fran passed away on the day after Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat of song, so named because we read the song at the sea, which Bnei Israel sang after the Exodus from Egypt. It's a song of thanksgiving. It's a song that reflects the importance of remembering history. History. Fran was born in Philadelphia. She went to high school there and then to the University of Pennsylvania, where she received a bachelor's and master's degrees in English. And that took her to a career as a teacher. She taught both kindergarten and high school, both ends of the spectrum over the years. And at first it was full-time in Upper Darby, and then as the boys came along, she needed to manage the household. She was a regular substitute teacher in Haddon Heights and in Cherry Hill. Later, an adjunct instructor at Rowan. For quite some time, Fran worked with children in an after-school program in Haddonfield. In all of these educational settings, Fran would draw upon poetry, word games, crosswords, all that she loved, to share them with her students, as well as arts and crafts. Poetry and song were part of all of that. Occasionally, Fran would take other jobs. For a time, she was a receptionist, all because she had to balance work and raising the boys. And that, by all accounts, was a full-time job. 4 boys. 4 boys who could be more than a little bit rammy. There were stories about breaking windows, throwing shoes, a game called Kill the Man Basketball, played in the basement. Reflecting on this, Dan said, "I was good, but those guys," there was plenty of wait till your father gets home. Fran was not the disciplinarian, and the guys knew that if their dad said no to something, they still had a good chance of getting a yes from Mom. Gary convinced her to buy him a motorcycle. Did any broken bones come from that? Just yours? Okay. The wrong guy got the broken bones. Summarizing your relationship with your mom, you said, she would do anything for us. You knew it, and you loved her for it. You sang her praises as a mom, her kindness, her caring, her cooking, which you described as creative, her casseroles in which she would cobble together whatever was available and then give it a fancy name, chicken oriental. You called her the casserole queen, but you also appreciated her patience when she frequently had to serve several dinners a night because you all came home at different hours and your dad so often worked late. You also had particular praise for her Wowie cake, which was a chocolate delight she made for special occasions. Now, we've noted that her partner in all of this was Jerry. And when he passed away back in 2011, Fran told me the story of how they met. It happens that Fran's mother was one of the secretaries at Wharton where Jerry was studying business, and he came in to take care of some paperwork, and the other secretary was busy, so he went to Fran's mom. She liked him immediately and did something Fran said she never did except that once. She gave him Fran's number. Once was enough. Jerry called her, and their first date was at the Windjammer Room, a restaurant in the Marriott at the time. However, what really sealed the deal was bagels. Jerry was taking exams, and Fran baked bagels for him and sent them along with a note. And Fran said, from then on, things really took off. And the boys said, it's just proof of the fact that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. But when I asked Fran what attracted her to Jerry, she said he was gentle and genuine and easy to talk with. And they made a marriage of 45 years. Worked to make a home, raised 4 boys, supported each other through whatever came. Jerry really appreciated Fran's poetry and her songs. Fran would ask friends and acquaintances to tell her about a special celebration they were having, and she would then take that information and turn it into something to be performed at the event. Jerry felt that she should market this, but Fran did it just to make people happy. She also played the guitar and sang at assisted living facilities around the area. She loved to bring a smile to people's faces, to brighten their day. It was part of her nature. And if the family went out to dinner, Fran would compliment the server or the person who bussed the table, and people loved her for it. Fran used artwork in the same way to bring a bit of joy to people she met, whether they were through her teaching or just in the course of day-to-day life. She made yarn necklaces and bracelets and gave them to people. She created collages. Stephen showed me one titled Food Fight. 2 boxers in a ring squared off with each other. But then when you look more closely, every part of the boxers is another piece of food. And she was very clever in doing that. She made many of these collages and gave them as gifts, and Stephen says he saw one framed and hanging in the office of one of her doctors. The only downside to this was that Fran was a bit of a hoarder. She would hang on to threads or tiles or yarn, magazines, newspaper articles, because she might use them later for some project. And as we've already heard, the newspapers were sources for limericks, poems, and puzzles. And she loved to create these crossword puzzles and acrostics, and they were published in magazines, some of them even in the magazines that you find in the behind the seat in airlines. Fran would call her sister Renee in Norristown every day to talk over the crossword puzzle. Back when that was a toll call, Jerry would see a 2-hour call on the phone bill, and it would be, "Francie?" But he always admired the way Fran had with words, and he particularly loved when she turned them into poems and songs. You all did this. You all loved it. And I should say that we all loved it, because we would occasionally hear them at TBS, and that brings us to the family's involvement in the congregation. This is the family file. We keep a file on families. It's quite thick. I found the letter that Rabbi Lewis wrote to Fran and Jerry when they first became members of the congregation in 1971. The copies back then were kept on this onion skin type of paper. We are very pleased to have this opportunity to welcome you into the ranks of the membership of Temple Beth Shalom. We hope that your new association with us will result in spiritual and cultural benefits to you. Now that you have been affiliated with us, I would like to extend to you an invitation to join with us for our activities, religious, social, and cultural. Please feel free to call upon me in any way I can be helpful to you and your family. I'm looking forward to greeting you at services. Best wishes for a healthy, peaceful, and prosperous new year. Cordially, Rabbi Lewis. And then there's this letter from 1980. Dear Fran, a hearty yasher koach to you for a delightful musical interlude which was drama of the highest order, i.e. your choral group. If you don't call it a choral group, it was at least among the lines of great chorus. Well done. Excellent portrayal. More important, set such a wonderful tone for this new year. We thank you for your willingness to constantly share your talent with us. And again, this one signed by Sarah and Albert Lewis. Yeah, we have the Hebrew School records. We, of course, saw Fran and Jerry regularly at Shabbat and holiday services, but what I was really looking for in the file was one of the poems. I thought for sure we would have one, but we had only one. However, it's too good not to read, so here we go. The title of this one is But No Bread. Pesach is the time of year when most of us indulge our willingness to declare a truce in the battle of the bulge. And so we feast on carrot simis, knedlach, light as air, matzah brie, potato kugel, Passover rolls to spare. Roasted chicken, honey glazed, and farfel stuffing too, asparagus with hollandaise, and yam and apple stew. Apricot roll and lemon tort, a luscious fruit parfait, coconutty macaroons, and billowy prune souffle. Sponge cake, hazelnuts and all, the chocolate bars we please. The next week, the bunny food, and fat-free cottage cheese. Ah, Fran, even as we mourn your loss, you bring smiles. The Baal Shem Tov is right. Mourning with a song or a poem. Fran's declining health in the last few years have been difficult for all of you, I know, and I won't shed any more of the spotlight on Jen. We all know how much she did for Fran. And you all understood what she needed and how to make her comfortable. The anatomical cat you got her was part of that. Genius. She carried it everywhere. Of course, it would occasionally start to meow during some program she was attending, and the nurses would turn it off. And then she'd call you worried that it was sick or something, and you'd have to get them to turn it back on. But it really helped to calm her. She enjoyed visits from friends from TBS. Bonnie Friedman was a particularly good friend. She came every Shabbat after services, frequently bringing some chocolate treat from Kiddush because Fran always loved chocolate. And those visits meant a lot. But what really made Fran light up was a visit from Josie. Actually, even the mention of any of the grandchildren would bring a happy smile to her face. But Josie's visits were something special because they would sing and even dance together. Song, the power to lift our spirits. And that brings us back to the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. We can indeed find comfort in the words of a poem or a song at a time of loss. And you know, following a funeral, when the family returns home for Shiva, they kindle a candle. It's one of the few acts in our tradition for which there are no prescribed words, no fixed blessing. But that doesn't mean that we cannot find words for that moment. And for that, I would turn to a passage from the biblical book, Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, where we find this poetic passage that compares love to a flame and says, Mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechabot et ha'ahava. Great floods of water cannot extinguish the flame of love. Unaharot lo yishtafua, and raging rivers can't wash it away. Ki azach hamavet ha'ahava, for in the end, love is even stronger than death. That love that you have in your hearts for Fran Ackerman, a wonderful wife, mother, sister, grandmother, friend, will continue to bring bright memories that will be a blessing for all the days and the years to come. We rise for a final prayer.
Male rachamim shochen b'amromim Hamseh menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina b'malot kedoshim u'toarim k'zohar harakia mazhirim et nishmat Tzipora bat Shimshon v'Sara shalacha l'olama began Eden tehei menuchata Ana bal harachamim Hastireh beseter kenafecha leolamim Utzror achayim et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata B'tanuach b'shalom al bishkava V'nomar amen, amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Fran Ackerman, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated.
I just want to note that at the conclusion of services at the cemetery, Shiva will begin. Services tonight will be at Gary's house, and then on Saturday night there will be a minyan at Stephen and Jen's home.